You know that feeling when you're just swimming in this sea of information and all you really want is someone to hand you like a compass and a map?
Yeah, exactly. It feels overwhelming sometimes.
Well, that's pretty much what we're trying to do here. In a world just awash with data, getting truly informed, it can feel like a full-time job, honestly.
Huh?
So today, we're going to cut through some of that noise. We'll bring you the essential nuggets from an analytical report we've got on the Watchman Privacy podcast.
Okay.
Our mission for this deep dive is really to understand its unique approach, how it tries to empower its audience.
And what we're diving into today, it's described in the report as an unfiltered show. It has this very clear, pretty ambitious mission, basically, to give listeners the tools and the understanding they need for comprehending and escaping the technocracy.
Escaping the technocracy. That's quite a phrase.
It is. And it's a really fascinating look at how this one platform defines its purpose and how it carefully selects its voices, its guests, to try and achieve that goal.
Absolutely. So think of it like we're peeling back the layers today. We'll start by trying to understand the architect behind this map, the host himself, Gabriel Custodiet.
Right.
Then we'll navigate through a really compelling, maybe even a bit heartbreaking, real-world case study. It starkly illustrates the very landscape the Watchman Privacy wants to help you escape.
A concrete example. Good.
Yeah. And finally, we'll zoom out a bit, see how a whole range of experts, each with their own sort of unique compass, contribute to this journey for autonomy. We think it'll leave you with some, well, surprising facts and maybe a fresh perspective on privacy and self-determination.
Sounds like a plan.
So, that phrase again, empowering its audience by providing the tools and understanding necessary for comprehending and escaping the technocracy. It's a pretty bold claim for a show. What does that phrase really mean in the context of Gabriel's work? And how does that foundational mission, practically shape the content choices they make?
Yeah, that's the core of it, isn't it? When the Watchman Privacy talks about technocracy, they're essentially referring to a system where technological experts, and often the technology itself, end up exerting significant control over society.
Okay, so control through tech.
Pretty much. And this impacts, well, everything from governance and digital surveillance right down to individual freedoms. What's really insightful from our report is seeing how the podcast isn't just reporting on these privacy threats. It's proactively trying to build a sort of user manual for digital self-determination.
A user manual, I like that.
Yeah. The key takeaway seems to be that it moves beyond just critique. It tries to offer a consistent framework for action, making individual autonomy an active, kind of ongoing project for its listeners.
And leading that charge, as you mentioned, is the host, Gabriel Custodiet.
Okay.
He's not just a voice you hear. The report details he's a privacy consultant, strong background in cybersecurity,
Right.
and a clear interest in global finance, politics, these really complex systems that govern our lives now.
And his expertise is grounded, too. He authored the Watchman Guide to Privacy.
Ah, okay. So he wrote the book on it, literally.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which is positioned as this definitive resource for anyone starting or maybe continuing their privacy journey. So this isn't just some speculative show. It feels anchored in practical, real-world knowledge.
That makes sense.
Mm.
His background, the book, it establishes his credibility right from the start.
Precisely. It signals to listeners that the podcast is coming from a place of deep, practical understanding. And that foundational credibility, well, it underpins the very structure of the show. The report highlights it as a deliberate exploration of resistance and autonomy.
So it's about understanding the challenges, yes, but then crucially, giving actionable insights for navigating them.
That's it. Understand, then act.
Right. And to keep that focus, the report identifies 4 key thematic pillars. These seem to guide the podcast's content, who they invite on. You've got digital security and privacy, financial autonomy, sociopolitical critiques, and personal self-sufficiency. That feels pretty comprehensive, doesn't it? Covering all the angles of that mission.
It absolutely is. It ensures that quite diverse topics, anything from, cutting-edge cybersecurity to community resilience, they all seem to align under that single overarching mission: understanding and escaping the technocracy.
Makes sense. Each pillar is like a different facet of that struggle for individual autonomy in this digital age.
Exactly. Different fronts in the same, well, not war, but the same challenge.
Okay, so the report highlights a particular case study that's, as I said, compelling, but also, frankly, quite heartbreaking. Can you walk us through the story of Alberto Hill? Why is he such a critical example for understanding this podcast's mission?
The story of Alberto Hill is, it's pivotal. He's a Uruguayan ethical hacker. And the report is careful to distinguish him from, say, cybercriminals like Albert Gonzalez. This isn't that kind of story.
Okay, ethical hacker. Got it.
Alberto is, well, highly credentialed. He holds associate's engineering and master's degrees in computer-related fields. Wow. On top of that, he's PMP certified, that's project management professional, a pretty high-level certification, and a certified ethical hacker. So he understands malicious techniques, but for defensive purposes.
He knows the tools of the trade, but uses them for good.
That's the idea. He even spent 4 years as a security consultant for the Uruguayan government, did digital forensics work with Interpol. This isn't just some hobbyist tinkering in his basement. He's a skilled expert.
Okay, so very qualified. What happened?
Well, with all that expertise, apparently driven by curiosity, Alberto discovered a really critical security vulnerability. It was on his girlfriend's medical provider's website.
Oh, wow. Sensitive stuff.
Very. He found it was accessible with default admin credentials. The report calls it a solid 10 out of 10 flaw.
Just default login for medical data. Yikes.
Exactly. And what did he do? He did the responsible thing. He reported it to Uruguay's CERT, their Computer Emergency Response Team, the national body for handling cybersecurity incidents. He even included his own IP address for full transparency.
He gave him his own IP. Okay, that's being upfront.
Completely. But this is where the profound irony of the system really kicks in. 2 years later, a totally unrelated hacking incident occurred at the very same facility.
Ah. Not him. Something else.
Something else entirely. But the police tracing an IP address related to this new incident were somehow led to Alberto.
Wait, how? If it was unrelated.
That part isn't fully detailed in the report we have, but the outcome was, during a raid on his home, law enforcement found his computers, his electronic devices, various hacking tools, which, remember, are part of his profession as an ethical hacker, and even, somewhat dramatically, a Guy Fawkes mask.
Oh boy. That looks bad out of context.
Extremely. And based on finding those things, they became convinced of his guilt in the unrelated incident.
That's a pretty stark illustration, isn't it?
Yeah.
It really makes you think about these hidden complexities, the pitfalls of justice in our digital age.
It really does. And the central legal drama, as described by Alberto in the interview, highlights such, well, technical ignorance within the justice system. He described how the judge and prosecutor hardly knew what an IP address was and kept asking irrelevant questions.
So they didn't understand the basics of the digital world they were investigating.
Apparently not. And his conviction ultimately wasn't based on digital evidence, which Alberto was confident simply didn't exist to link him to that second incident. Instead, it was based on circumstantial evidence, the hacker paraphernalia found in his home, and crucially, a forced verbal confession.
Forced? How?
Made, according to Alberto, under the threat that they would raid his family's homes if he didn't confess.
Oh, that's awful. So circumstantial evidence and coercion, not digital proof.
That's the picture painted. And despite his certainty about the lack of digital evidence, he was sentenced to prison.
Wow. What's truly fascinating, though, from the report's analysis of the podcast itself, is Gabriel Custodiet's initial hesitation about even publishing this interview.
Really?
A behind-the-scenes message, cited in the report, revealed he was concerned about Alberto's very, very thick accent. He actually worried it might affect audience retention, that people might tune out.
That's an interesting tension.
It is. But his ultimate decision to proceed, to publish it anyway, demonstrates a deliberate choice, right? Prioritizing the genuine, unfiltered narrative over a perfectly polished presentation.
Yeah, that speaks volumes. It embodies that commitment. The podcast claims to be an unfiltered show. It shows integrity, sharing crucial stories, even if they aren't packaged perfectly for, mass appeal.
That commitment to the unfiltered narrative really does shine through there. So how then does Alberto's individual struggle, his story, fit into the broader critique of this technocracy that the podcast is trying to convey?
Well, Alberto's story serves as this really powerful microcosm of the technocracy the podcast critiques. Here you have an individual with profound technical understanding.
The expert hacker.
Exactly. Judged and ultimately punished by a system that fundamentally fails to grasp the basic concepts of his world, of the digital realm.
It's a stark illustration of how transparency, remember, he gave them his IP address willingly.
Right. How even transparency offered with good intentions can be turned against you when the system, the authorities, lack the necessary understanding or context. The key insight here really is that the justice system, often unprepared for the nuances of the digital age, can misinterpret or even weaponize technical realities, and it's often at the expense of individual liberty.
Alberto's story is definitely a chilling, very humanizing illustration of how this idea that technocracy can impact an individual. But the Watchman Privacy isn't just about identifying problems, right? You said it's about tools, solutions, people offering alternatives.
Correct. It's not just diagnosis, it aims for prognosis and treatment, so to speak.
So how does the podcast maintain this consistent focus across its other guest selections? How does it offer diverse perspectives that still align with that core mission?
That's a critical question. And the podcast's credibility, as our analysis suggests, seems built not on, say, mainstream alignment or approval, but on its ability to consistently attract subject matter authorities, people who offer critical examinations of power structures, and crucially, potential pathways to autonomy. Each guest, in their own way, contributes another piece to building that comprehensive map for listeners trying to navigate this stuff.
Okay, let's look at an example. Richard Turn, the report calls him a fintech visionary. He's described as a globally recognized authority in finance and tech, former IBM exec, top 4 global fintech influencer. Quite the resume.
Yeah, he's clearly a heavy hitter in that space.
And he wrote Cashless, China's digital currency revolution. Apparently, his decade living in Shanghai gave him firsthand experience with China's cashless society. What unique insight does someone like him bring to this deep dive?
His contribution to the podcast, as highlighted in the report, is invaluable. He offers this strategic warning that really, well, it hits home. Turn explains China's central bank digital currency, the CBDC.
We hear a lot about those.
We do, but he frames it not just as a payment system. He sees it as a potential digital entry token to a new kind of trade platform.
A digital entry token. What does that mean exactly?
What he seems to be revealing is that this isn't just about convenience like tapping your phone to pay. It's potentially about a fundamental shift in how transactions, and maybe even global trade itself, could be controlled and monitored.
So more control-less privacy.
That's the implication. And his warning that Western regulators are significantly far behind China in understanding and developing these systems, that's a critical nugget for anyone thinking about the future of finance and, by extension, individual liberty. The takeaway here is that the silent revolution happening in digital currencies could redefine our very access to economic participation. It's bigger than just payments.
Okay, that's a major global perspective. Now, the report also mentions Jacques Bruderick from Afriforum. This introduces a layer of controversy, doesn't it? Particularly around some historical statements made by the organization. How does the Watchman Privacy podcast navigate that? How does it report impartially on this idea of parallel societies without, endorsing specific political viewpoints?
That's a crucial point, and the report is pretty clear on how the podcast handles it. The discussion, as presented on the show, focuses squarely on Afriforum's activities, things like operating neighborhood watches, running a private prosecution unit.
Practical actions.
Exactly. These are presented as a tangible example of what the podcast calls a parallel society, essentially. People building self-reliance in response to what they perceive as state failure. Things like rising crime, maybe governmental incompetence, breakdown of public services.
So the focus is on the concept of parallel structures when state ones seem weak.
Precisely. The podcast explores this concept of building parallel systems in practical terms. It's not presented as an endorsement of Afriforum's specific politics, but rather an examination of how such approaches might play out in real-world scenarios. The core insight being explored is how can communities create their own systems when they feel state structures are failing them? This links back to that escaping the technocracy idea, but in a more physical, community-based way, going beyond purely digital solutions.
Got it. So it's about the phenomenon, not necessarily the specific group exemplifying it.
That seems to be the framing described in our analysis, yes. Maintaining that impartial stance while exploring the theme.
Okay, shifting gears back to the digital realm then. We have Seth for Privacy. The report calls him a cypherpunk turned expert. Sounds intriguing.
Yeah, he's described as a key figure in the cryptocurrency community, specifically an advocate and developer for Monero.
Monero.
Yeah.
Known for its privacy features, right? Untraceability.
Exactly. That's its whole raison d'etre. He contributes to tools like a Dockerized Monero node, which in simple terms is like a pre-packaged, easier way for individuals to run their own secure piece of the Monero network.
Making it more accessible for non-experts to participate securely.
Precisely, which boosts their own privacy and makes the whole network more resilient. He also writes extensive guides. So what actionable intelligence does someone like him provide on the show?
Well, Seth for Privacy brings that deep technical expertise on Monero, which, by its very design, serves as a direct countermeasure to the transparent, traceable nature of many other cryptocurrencies.
Like Bitcoin, for example.
Right. And therefore, a counter to the potential for a financial surveillance state. He offers actionable solutions for maintaining financial privacy. The report even mentions him discussing responses to a hypothetical 51% attack attempt on the Monero network.
A 51% attack, that's serious stuff in crypto, where one entity gets majority control.
And could potentially manipulate transactions, double spend funds, censor users. Yeah.
So his insights here are about how Monero is engineered, technically, to resist those kinds of powerful threats. It gives listeners concrete examples of how technology can be built to protect their digital financial footprint. The key insight is that achieving real financial autonomy in a digital world. It requires deeply understanding and actually using these privacy-focused technologies. It's not theoretical.
It's about choosing the right tools. And finally, bridging that gap between abstract philosophy and practical application, we have the Privacy Postmaster. This guest represents a company, privacypost.io, offering tangible services that seem to really align with the podcast's whole ethos.
Exactly. This is where it gets very hands-on for the listener. Their services, according to the report, include things like virtual mailboxes, worldwide mail forwarding, help with setting up LLCs, even vehicle registration assistance.
Okay, so practical stuff for reducing your physical footprint or dependence on traditional systems.
Precisely. It's all tailored specifically for, say, virtual entrepreneurs, digital nomads, people seeking more independence. This segment is significant because it moves beyond the theoretical discussions of privacy or finance.
And gives you actual things you can sign up for.
Right? Concrete, actionable tools that can enable location independence and personal freedom from surveillance and potentially state control. Their emphasis on end-to-end encrypted mail, private communication options, accepting cryptocurrency payments, it all aligns perfectly with the podcast's mission. It offers a direct pathway for listeners to actually implement strategies for greater autonomy.
So the core takeaway there is that practical, everyday solutions exist right now for you, the listener, to begin building your own more resilient, privacy-focused life. It's not just philosophy.
Exactly. It connects the dots from the big ideas right down to actionable steps.
So wrapping this up, what does this all mean for us? What's the big picture from this deep dive into the Watchman Privacy podcast? It seems meticulously crafted by Gabriel Custodiet, building its credibility not really on mainstream approval,
No, definitely not.
but on this unwavering commitment to a very cohesive philosophical vision,
Yeah.
helping you navigate and potentially escape the technocracy.
Yeah, that sums it up well. From the deeply personal, almost cautionary tale of Alberto Hill illustrating the profound risks when legal systems don't grasp technology,
Right.
to the global financial warnings from Richard Turin about CBDCs and control, and then down to the practical tools and strategies offered by people like Seth for privacy with Monero and the Privacy Postmaster with their services, the guests consistently offer these counter-narratives. They offer actionable pathways toward personal freedom.
So the podcast really positions itself as this crucial, well-researched resource. If you're seeking to understand the complexities of power, privacy, autonomy in our digital age, it seems designed to connect those dots for you, bringing together diverse topics, but always framed within that powerful guiding mission.
That consistency is key to its approach, based on our analysis.
Okay, so this deep dive, it really reveals a fundamental tension in our world today, doesn't it? This relentless push for greater digital integration, more data, more connectivity.
The benefits of which are undeniable in many ways.
True. But it's pushing against this deeply human desire, maybe even a need for individual privacy and autonomy, for some space that isn't tracked or controlled.
A very real tension.
So as you, our listener, reflect on these stories and insights we've discussed today, maybe consider this. How do you personally balance the undeniable benefits of modern technology with your own need for privacy and self-determination? Where do you draw the line? And perhaps, what's one practical step, even a small one, you might take this week to better understand or perhaps protect your digital footprint? Or maybe even explore building a tiny piece of your own parallel society, whatever that might mean for you. Something to think about.